Hello, dear fighters. I am a doctor of biological sciences, and my name is Naya, and today I'm going to tell you about the threat we're facing. As you all already know, these are parasites. We still don't know exactly where and how they get to us, but they are definitely not from our world. For a more effective fight against these creatures, I will provide you with all the information we have. So, here we go. Despite the fact that parasites have a huge variety of forms, they can all be divided into 4 main groups. These are the parasites themselves, the various creatures infected with them, and then there are some new forms resulting from further changes that have occurred with the infected creatures. These latter, let's call them metamorphs, come in 2 stages: primitive and adaptive. 2 bosses can be distinguished into a separate subgroup of parasites, but we will consider everything in order. We'll start with the infected. At the moment, we know that parasites can infect cows, sheep, pigs, and wolves. Residents and some humanoid forms, such as zombies, piggies, and cadavers, are also suitable for infecting with parasites. At the same time, parasites attack other humanoid forms of witches, champions, spellcasters, and various types of skeletons, but they are not able to infect them. At least so far we have not observed this. Perhaps this will change in the future, and we will have to revise the correctness of our data. So, based on all that has been said, there are 8 types of infected forms, among which the origin of 2 is currently a mystery. Almost all infected forms are quite fast and very aggressive, but there is a chance to escape from some of them. One of the weaknesses is that they are quite slow in the water, and absolutely none of them knows how to climb over walls and fences, except for one species that can fly. Another piece of good news is that absolutely none of the infected are able to directly infect healthy individuals, as parasites of infectious agents do. However, there is still an indirect possibility of infection. Often, after killing an infected person, the larvae of infectious agents break out of his body. If you do not destroy them on the spot, then over time, they will grow and will be able to spread the infection. Also, when infected people die, they sometimes manage to transmit a distress signal to the parasites, and they send reinforcements. But we will talk about this danger again a little later. Now we will look at the forms of infected themselves. So, an infected cow appears as a result of exposure to a spider-like parasite, an infecting agent, which we will consider a little later. She has 18 points of health. She is able to inflict 7 points of damage, armor again, resistance to dropping 0.4. It should be mentioned here that if the resistance to dropping is equal to 1, then the mob does not throw back when you attack. A dead cow, like all infected mobs, can give you an unpleasant surprise in the form of fireworks from larvae or a running live head. Also, after death, infected cows can drop infected flesh. It looks unsightly, but do not disdain to collect this loot. It may be useful to you in the future. Infected cows are pretty fast, so if you are attacked by a whole herd, do not get involved in a fight, but if possible, take your feet away or lure them to a place where you can deal with them without putting yourself in danger. An infected pig occurs in a similar way as a result of an attack of infectious agents on an ordinary pig. She is weaker than a cow and, fortunately, runs quite slowly. Her health is 9 units. She wears 3.5 units of damage. The armor is very weak, 0.1, and the resistance to dropping is also 0.1. After death, it drops infected flesh, and can also leave you a dirty trick in the form of a running head. The infected sheep, as it is easy to guess, appears from an ordinary sheep. Health 13, damage 6, armor 1.3, drop resistance 0.3. It runs about like a cow. After death, it drops infected flesh and can leave gifts in the form of a half-finished head. An infected wolf is only slightly stronger than an infected pig, only 10 health units, but it has the most powerful attack in this category, 10.5 units. However, His armor is only 0.5 units, and the resistance to dropping is 0.2. But he is smart enough, and after death, he can present his head to you. It's infected flesh. An infected resident occurs when the infectants come into contact with villagers or any forms of zombies. Health 16, damage 10, armor 5, drop resistance 0.2. He runs quite smartly, drops infected flesh, and can also leave a surprise head, a slightly weaker form than an infected resident, and this is an infected person. Where and exactly how people are infected remains a mystery, but they often appear in places where parasites accumulate. Health 15, damage 9, armor 5, drop resistance 0.1. It's infected flesh. 4 leaving the heads are not noticed. Infected big spider, aka Dorpa. By the way, in addition to the previously mentioned infected, all parasites have a special name, and you need to know it. For what? We'll talk about this later. In the meantime, let's get back to our infected. From the name, it could be assumed that an infected large spider occurs when spiders are infected with parasites, but in fact, this process has not been noticed. That is, parasites, of course, attack spiders, but as a result of these attacks, the spiders simply die. Apparently, the infected spider got into our world together with the parasites and was infected either in their home world or somewhere in another world that the parasites got into earlier than ours. The infected spider has the strongest health in this group, as many as 22 units. He has 9 attack points, 3 armor, and 0.4 drop resistance. And it is also very large and quite fast, and can spit cobwebs, and thereby cause damage in 4 units. Unfortunately, the web is not as good as that of ordinary spiders, and is destroyed even just with bare hands, and over time, it can disappear itself. In addition, it is not possible to get threads from it, but you can get confused and slow down in it very untimely, so be careful. Fortunately, infected spiders do not know how to climb walls at all and, despite their size, cannot step over the fence. There is no drop by default. The heads of infected spiders do not come off. The last creature in the infected group is Olaf. Where it comes from is also a mystery, but apparently it is an infected creature, like a dorp from some other world. Health 18, attack 7, armor 3, drop resistance 0.4. And this creature flies, and in theory it can be suspected that it is capable of attacks from a distance, but lately for some reason it has been behaving quite peacefully. After death, it can drop infected flesh. So, we have reviewed all the forms of infected creatures known to us today. As you understand, these creatures are quite unpleasant to communicate with, but since they cannot infect directly, it may seem to you that they are not too dangerous. For example, if you compare them with the same visors or ender dragon, but do not rush to rejoice. Severed heads and a bunch of maggots are not the only thing they can surprise you with the exception of the infected big spider and possibly Olaf. All infected are capable of metamorphosis, that is, changes. In order to be reborn into a new form, they mercilessly kill almost everything that comes into their field of vision, including even monsters. In order for the change process to begin, 2 conditions must be met. First, the infected must kill a certain number of creatures. As we found out, this is usually the number of 5. The second condition is that there must be 3 more infected people nearby, regardless of the type and number of murders they committed, excluding the spider and Olafa mentioned above. These 2 are incompatible with the local forms of infected. If the conditions are right, then all 4 of them will begin to melt, as it were, until in the end, some amorphous masses of flesh will remain from them. These masses are alive, and they tend to merge by themselves. They are not dangerous, because in this state, they are not able to attack, and at the sight of danger, they try to escape. An urgent recommendation for all fighters: is to immediately destroy this infection before it is reborn. If all these pieces of living flesh come together in one large enough piece, then this piece will undergo a change, as a result of which a new type of infected will appear. In general, they can no longer be considered infected from this moment on, since they are no longer the same creatures that they were originally. But these are not the parasites themselves, but rather some new form of life formed under the influence of infection. Let's call this group of creatures metamorphs, or with alliances, to put it simply, and at this stage, they will be considered primitive. By the way, metamorphosis can also occur without the presence of other infected people nearby, provided that the infected person who has committed a sufficient number of murders is next to a lump of living flesh. In this case, it will also begin to melt and will be able to join this very lump. If, as a result, the lump turns out to be large enough, then the transformation into a primitive merge will occur. If there are other infected people and living flesh next to the infected person who has reached the required number of kills, then other infected people will not participate in the fusion process. What kind of fusion the living flesh will turn into as a result depends on how much health there was in the original infected. Let's now look at all kinds of primitive xiangs. There are only 6 of them. The weakest of them is a primitive Chur. Health 18 units, attack 8, armor 4, drop resistance 0.5. There are rumors that under certain conditions, he can go into a state of invisibility. Under such conditions, it can be detected only by focusing on the sound. The primitive yellow eye has even a little less health and a weaker attack, but it can fly. Health 15, attack 4, armor 3.5, drop resistance 0.2. Shoots poison, poisons for 3 seconds, and in addition to the obvious damage, also damages your armor. So if you do not dodge his attacks, you risk soon finding yourself defenseless equipment. The primitive stinker comes in 2 varieties that differ in color. Gray, which has 10 health units, and beige, which is stronger. He has 20 health, attack 10, armor 12, resistance to dropping 0.6. Quite fast, hits hard, and is able to impose poisoning of the first level. A primitive amplifier, health 35, attack 6, armor 4, drop resistance 0.35 hundredths. At this stage, it cannot boast of a strong attack. Besides, it is quite slow, but the amplifiers are not eager to fight in the first rows. Their task is to distribute positive effects to parasites and their minions. In particular, it increases protection and gives regeneration. A primitive summoner, health 35, attack 10, armor 4, drop resistance 0.5. In addition to a strong enough attack, it is also dangerous because it can call for help with its screeching, and not larvae, but adults at once. The strongest in this group is the primitive long arm. His health is as much as 70 units. He deals damage in 15 units, armor is 9, resistance to discarding is 0.7. For each percentage of health lost, his attack power increases, that is, the more he is wounded, the harder he hits. So you should engage in close combat with him with extreme caution. Can-do jerks running, representatives of a group of primitive slugs, are stronger than ordinary infected ones, although, fortunately, they are also unable to step over fences and climb walls, except for the flying yellow eye. What one can definitely not be afraid of from a group of primitive science is that the larvae of infectious agents will climb out of their corpses. And this is despite the fact that sometimes their corpses also explode. They are also unable to infect healthy creatures with their attacks. The exception is the summoner, who is not able to infect himself, but calls for the healers. None of the primitive Sloyans drops anything after death. In addition to their thirst for murder, primitive Trojans pose another danger. They are capable of further metamorphoses, as a result of which they acquire their advanced or adaptive form. This happens when a primitive metamorph reaches a certain number of kills. Usually it's 10 to 11 mobs. In this case, lightning strikes him, and he changes. All adaptive forms are many times stronger than their primitive forms, but they are not able to infect. Most have the ability, so to speak, to shake themselves off. In this case, particles of infected plaque fall from them, which eventually disappears. However, there is also a risk that a lighthouse may be born on it. We'll talk about the lighthouse separately a little later. Almost all adaptive forms have a special loot, which is quite a valuable trophy. Let us now consider all these creatures. So, the adaptive form of the chewer. Health is 33 units, damage is 20, armor is 10, resistance to dropping is 1. That is, it does not throw back at all when attacking. A valuable chewer's eye shot. Adaptive yellow eye. Health 40 units, attack 9, armor 28.5, resistance to dropping 0.6. And this kind of yellow eye is even more dangerous because it can fight in close combat, causing 30 units of damage. In addition, it is still more poisonous than its primitive version and imposes a second-level poisoning. A valuable stone falls from it, a yellow eye bone. Adaptive stinker. Health 55, attack 28, armor 27, drop resistance 1. Even more poisonous than the primitive one, it imposes poisoning of the second level. A valuable shot is the stinky blade. Adaptive amplifier. From a rather weak primitive amplifier, a huge one turns out with a large health reserve of as much as 105 units. Attack 36, armor 19, resistance to dropping units. He boosts his own even more powerfully. In addition to regeneration and increased protection, it also strengthens the health reserve, so if possible, kill him one of the first. If of course you can get close without risking your health. Adaptive summoner. Health 95, attack 25, armor 14, drop resistance 1. In addition to infectious agents, it is also able to call upon some infected people as reinforcements, for example, cows, wolves, and people. As a valuable drop, the core, which is also the core of the summoner, can fall from it. And the last one in this group, well, certainly not the last in terms of danger. And this is an adaptive long arm. This creature can be reborn into two slightly different forms. One of them has a greenish-beige color. Health will be even less than the primitive version had, only 60 units. But the second one, gray, has almost twice as much, as many as 120 units. Attack somewhere 27, armor 16, resistance to dropping units. The one that seems weaker than the healthy one, in fact, hits twice as hard as the one with a large margin of hit points. And don't forget that the properties of primitive forms extend to adaptive ones as well. So the more you hit the long arms, the more you get a valuable shot in response, a fragment of the shell. Well, now it's time to deal directly with the parasites themselves. First of all, it is worth mentioning that all parasites, as well as their minions, are absolutely insensitive to poisons, so it will not work to poison them. Their main weakness is fire, so it is recommended to use a weapon capable of setting fire against them. Parasites appear in our world, as well as their minions, mainly at night, but daylight does not have a negative effect on them. That is, they do not burn in the sun. After killing the parasites, you won't find any loot. Absolutely all parasites, including their minions, are able to summon a reinforcement beacon. Infect potential victims can only infect. So, the infectious agents appear from the larvae. Larvae are weak. Health is only 7 units. Damage is inflicted in 3 units. Protection is 1.5 units. And resistance to rejection is 0 as much as 0.05. They appear most often from the corpses of infected people. And after some time, they grow up to full-fledged infectious agents. The infectors themselves are the only kind of parasites capable of turning healthy mobs into infected ones. Health 10, damage 5, armor 5, drop resistance 0.5. Not very strong, but very fast spider-like creatures. The most unpleasant thing about them is that they are able to impose second-level slowdown. In addition, they, like spiders, climb walls, so it will not be possible to hide cattle from them behind a fence. Heavy transporter. Health 30, armor 5, drop resistance 0.95 hundredths. A big thing with 3 spherical capsules on top. By itself, it does not hit the enemy in any way, either in close combat or in distant combat, but when it sees the target, it goes to it, comes close, after which it explodes, and lands troops in the form of larvae, infectious agents, and primitive yellow eyes. It deals damage with its explosion, and can kill if the enemy has little health left. If it is destroyed in time, then the landing will not happen. A flying transporter. Health 20, armor 2.5, drop resistance 0.15 hundredths. Like the previous one, this transporter does not attack itself, but flies and lands troops in the form of infectious agents and their larvae. It explodes in the same way to carry out the landing of parasites, but it usually does not damage by the explosion itself. If you kill it before it explodes, then the landing party will die with it. Vigilante. Health 35, armor 5, melee attack 10, and ranged 15. The resistance to discarding is 1. It is called by the Lighthouse and protects the territory. Very fast, able to impose poisoning of the first level. Kyphos. Health 50, armor 15, damage 15, and a special attack that looks like a fly swatter as much as 35 units. It has no resistance to being thrown away, but it will not be moved from its place, because it grows to the ground. It will spawn on infected land. Apparently, it is called by the Lighthouse to protect the territory in general, and the Lighthouse itself in particular. The Guardian. 30 health, 5 melee damage, deals as much as 25 points of damage in ranged combat. The armor is 10, and, like Kyphosis, grows out of the ground, so that casting does not affect it. Capable of inflicting poisoning of the first level. It can fire bursts of 3 charges and disable your armor. It will spawn in the same way as Kyphosis, on the infected land, at the call of the Lighthouse. The Commandant. Health 75, attack 25, armor 15, and drop resistance 1. It is capable of breaking blocks, in particular earth, wood, stone, and cobblestone. Can make high jumps. Called by the Lighthouse. In addition to the usual parasites, in a rare case you may encounter 2 bosses. Of course, these events are out of the ordinary, because bosses are not jokes to you. They are much stronger than anyone we have considered so far. Such a meeting may occur with some degree of probability when the lighthouse of the highest stage is destroyed. So, an ancient dreadnought. Health 200, damage 15, armor 15, drop resistance 1. It flies at a height of at least 7 blocks, so it's hard to reach it. He flies, shoots, applies desiccation, and periodically drops landing capsules with infectious agents while destroying the landscape. It looks extremely epic. But do not relax, or while admiring, you will not notice how the parasites will take over the whole world. If he is attacked, then as his health decreases, tentacles will fall off from him, and they will fall to the ground. Each of these tentacles has 50 health units, and in principle, they lie and do not run away. However, it is impossible to leave them just like that, because larvae periodically appear from these tentacles and spread across the territory. By the way, the dreadnought itself, if necessary, is also capable of breaking blocks, including a stone. There is no loot from it. The Ancient Lord. Health 250, damage 20, armor 15, drop resistance 1. Walks on the ground and hits. There is no drop. The destruction of blocks has not yet been noticed. And now let's talk about the combat support system. When a parasite, or one of the infected, dies, there is a chance that they will transmit a distress signal to which a summoner will be called. He is also a signalman or a beacon. It's a cross between an animal and a plant. It sprouts from the ground and begins to infect the area around it, turning it into blocks of infected land. It penetrates 3 blocks deep into the infection and up to 10 blocks up on the surface. Any block whose hardness is less than 0.6 will be changed. Infected blocks can damage you, and with some chance, they will shoot something half a heart. But the armor, in particular the helmet, will protect you, so it is highly not recommended to run on infected ground without armor. Transparent blocks like glass and foliage are not sensitive to the harmful effects of lighthouses. Sand and gravel are also not susceptible to infection. So if you want to protect your base from the spread of infection, you should take this fact into account. The lighthouse is gradually growing, and the higher its level, the more area it can infect, and more powerful parasites can be summoned in greater numbers. When the infected earth has been standing for a very long time, peculiar growths, so-called veins or veins, may appear on it. There are no features noticed behind them, such as the ability to poison or demolish it. Perhaps the parasites drag them with them and plant them so that the captured world resembles as much as possible the one from where they came from. So, the lighthouse of the first level, as I mentioned, it randomly appears when killing parasites or their minions. At the same time, you will hear a sound as if a gong or bell has been struck. The health of such a beacon is small, only 10 units, so you can get rid of it pretty quickly if you don't miss the moment. It infects the earth within a radius of 4 blocks, that is, 4 blocks in each direction from itself. It will spawn up to 4 parasites. If one of them dies, he will call 4 new ones to replace them. After a while, you may hear the gong sound again. He announces that Lev's lighthouse has been touched, and now he has the second level. The lighthouse of the second level has 30 health units, and it is able to infect a large area already. Everything within a radius of 8 blocks will be turned into infected land if you do not take appropriate measures. Small gray-brown particles of either smoke or some kind of spores begin to fly over the infected ground. Such a beacon is able to recall, in addition to the infectious agents, also infected ones, namely people, cows, sheep, wolves, and large spiders, and from the parasites themselves flying transporters, can recall up to 9 parasites. If the size of the parasites is larger, then their total number may be less. If you do not take measures to eliminate the invaders and let everything take its course, then after some time, the lighthouse will grow again in level and reach the limit of its growth. In the third stage, the lighthouse has as much as 90 health units. It has strong armor, and therefore it is extremely difficult to destroy it. But these are still flowers compared to what he is actually capable of. It infects the earth within a radius of 16 blocks, and now, in addition to spores, large black and green particles of some kind of foreign fog will fly over it, and this beacon will remind you of parasites that you still could not encounter anywhere else in any other way. After all, it is the lighthouse of the third level that calls the vigilante and the commandant. This is not counting infectants, infected people, cows, sheep, wolves, spiders, hand lengths, stinkers, summoners, chewers, amplifiers, heavy and volatile transporters, and yellow eyes. A third-level lighthouse can spawn up to 12 parasites. Even after destroying such a beacon, there is no guarantee that you will be able to finish off the remaining parasites and defeat the invaders. After all, the death of a third-level lighthouse can provoke the summoning of a boss, an ancient dreadnought, or an ancient ruler. In general, if there is no desire to fight bosses, do not give the beacons any chance to grow. If the lighthouse can be destroyed, then a certain mass of plaque forms in its place, which begins to spread over the infected surface. After some time, this raid will disappear, and the infected land under it will turn into ordinary. It's very nice of the parasites to clean up their garbage after themselves. However, it's too early to relax. There is a risk that a lighthouse will be born again at the site of the raid, and the whole epic will begin anew. As you may have noticed, most parasites are just parasites. That is, nothing useful can be taken from them, but some of them kept something strange. Some remnants of shells and other incomprehensible gizmos. They found quite a practical application. With the help of these gizmos, you can create a unique weapon, which will partly be a weapon and partly a living organism. Such weapons are quite powerful and may make it a little easier for you to fight the invaders. So, from the parts of the parasites, you can create a living battle scythe and a great living bow. As you can see, crafting is quite complicated. It's not enough just to beat strong parasites. You will have to do it repeatedly, because each part of the weapon will have to be crafted separately from that very rare drop. Then, these parts need to be combined, and only after that, you will get the desired weapon. The damage from the scythe is 17 units, the attack speed is 0.8, the strength is thousands of units. That is, for a good blow, you will have to swing properly. But on the other hand, you will be able to house everyone who is in the immediate vicinity of you. By the way, you can put all sorts of cups on the weapon. The Great Living Bow has a strength of 700 units. It increases arrow damage, and the longer you aim, the higher it deals damage. For those of you who have not yet understood what is happening, we are considering the Scape and Run Zates mod, which in a free translation into Russian will sound like Parasites. Get your feet in your hands and run. The mod first appeared in October 2000 of the 19th year, and has been successfully developing since then. The mod exists only for the version of main 1.12.2, and so far it does not threaten to switch to any other versions. But who knows? If we consider the fashion tab, then, in addition to all of the above, you can see this kind of thing. It's not some kind of item. It's just added by the developers so that its image is in the library. And now about the configs. The mod is very highly configurable. You can change a whole bunch of different parameters: parasite health, spawn frequency for each parasite separately, spawn conditions, destructibility of blocks by parasites, dropped shot, again for each parasite separately. Will the parasites attack mobs or just players, and a lot of many other things. But one thing you need to take into account when setting up configurations: mobs in configs are called differently than in the game. That's why I pointed out their second names to you. If you want to change something, this hint will be useful to you. Despite the fact that it is fashionable for parasites to be relatively young, it is already very rake-like. It is regularly updated, and we must pay tribute to the developers. It turned out to be very interesting. I would especially like to mention the models of creatures, their textures and animations. In addition, they are represented in a wide variety. The mod has very interesting mechanics, in particular infection and evolution. By the way, the developers have big plans. In the near future, they are going to make a number of changes, including new models and textures, refine the mechanics of mobs, and, most importantly, a whole new biome. Here's a little spoiler with screenshots, straight from the original source. Here, we see a very peculiar atmosphere, some kind of green fog. Perhaps it will be poisonous. The whole earth is covered with unknown vegetation, and it looks like there are even some tree-like forms too. Various parasites are flying around a lot of lighthouses and in the sky. I think it will be very difficult to survive in such a biome. Well, I hope the mod made the same strong impression on you as it did on me. I think fans of fighting alien invaders should like it. It seems to me that it should go well with mods for strangers and various firearms. Try, experiment, and write in the comments what you get. By the way, you will find a link to the mod as always in the description under the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, look into the contact group and come to the streamers. Well, that's it for today. See you soon, my dear Murnyashki. Bye-bye.